a short update on a very important program for us, which is 25 by 2025, our focus on diversity in aviation. So without further ado, Anton, over to you.
Thanks, Tony. Good afternoon. I hope this is not entirely the graveyard shift. So I'll go through the presentation quickly. We'll probably have a couple of questions at the end. Just to let you know, most of the information is in the presentation that you will have in front of you or receive later. So just very quickly, 25 by 2025. The initiative was launched in September of 2019, specifically to raise awareness of the importance of diversity in the industry. What is this about? The requirements and what we ask in the airlines is fairly simple. Firstly, is to report annually on the key diversity metrics, to commit to increase the number of women in senior positions by 25% or 25% from where they are currently, to make the same commitment to underrepresented areas within their industries. And lastly, is to nominate 25% of women to governance roles within IATA. So if we go to the next slide, just a couple of numbers. So firstly, where are we today? Today, we have 50% of IATA members are signed up to the initiative. And this represents 54% of RTKs across the globe. If we look at the numbers in 2019, we started off with 59 signatories. 2020, we were in the midst of COVID. 2021, we had 100, and today we had 174 signatories. The 174 also include related industries that are in the value chain of aviation or the aviation industry. We have 27 non-member airlines, which I think is interesting, simply because when we launched this, it was aimed specifically at our members, but as we went along, we had non-members actually coming to us wanting to join the initiative. Just going back to that slide, I think what is really interesting, if you look at the spread, whoops, sorry, we've just lost it. Are you moving or I'm moving? Okay, there we go. If we look at the split across the globe, what is really interesting, if you look at Latin America and the Caribbean, where we have 81% of RTKs represented in that area, but only 34 airlines. The rest, we've got a fairly good split between MENA 60, Asia Pacific, Europe, etc. Where we've clearly got work to do is in North Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. Right, I think what we saw is the trend is continuing. We've seen some progress specifically in senior roles. In 2022, we had 5 new CEOs who are women that were appointed, which now brings a total of 24 CEOs in the industry who are women, which I think is a great change and a great step forward. Clearly, we're still not there, but we're on the right track. Just if we look at the signatories in 2019 to 2021, just to give you an idea of the number of companies that joined and airlines that joined in that year. In 2022, we had 74 signatories join the initiative. But just to put into context, we also had a number of industries or organizations which are not specifically airlines, and I'm picking up stuff like Airbus, etc. Again, it is not just about the airline industry, it's also about the complete value chain of the industry. When we look at the business impact of this initiative and the value of diversity for the business, we know it adds value to our businesses. But if we just look at the split between male and female across the globe, we've got about a 50-50% split. Therefore, if you're not utilizing the female population across the globe, we are not utilizing the resource available to us. And I think that's key as a business to ensure you're getting the right amount of resource and the right resources for that matter. Right. If we look at IATA specifically, we have had 24% at this stage women appointed to the advisory councils. That was in 2022. We have an increase in diverse panels at IATA events. For example, at the AGM, we had a 50% female panelist split of panelists at this year's AGM, which I think just again demonstrates our commitment to this initiative, not just as an industry, but also as an organization. We also ran a public opinion survey initiated by IATA, and a couple of questions related specifically to diversity. I think what is interesting, if you look at the positive responses to some of the questions, and I'll just go through them very quickly, the progress on gender diversity in the airline industry reflects society as a whole. 79% agreed with that. Many roles in airlines still follow gender stereotypes, 70%. And what is interesting is the awareness of customers today when they're choosing an airline. I choose to fly with airlines that are leaders in gender diversity. I think that clearly will demonstrate the impact on our businesses going forward. When we look at the statistics, just generally in the aviation industry, it mirrors what we see. When we look at 60 to 80% women in the cabin, 5 to 11% women on the flight deck, and 21% women in senior roles. So again, I think we clearly can understand the impact on our business and where we are today, which is not where we need to be in the future. If we look at the split in terms of diversity, and particularly on younger generations, I think the stats speak for themselves, particularly if we're looking at the younger generation who are more in tune and understand the topic of diversity and the importance of it. So I'm not going to go through all the numbers, but you can clearly see the younger generation finding it much more important and their commitment when they're flying as to the topic of diversity and how airlines are addressing diversity.
Maybe I could just add a little bit of color to that. So in the previous slide that Anton showed, it said 64% of people want to fly or told us that they want to fly with airlines that are leaders in diversity. And what we asked the survey company to do was to give us an age profile of the people who responded yes to that question. And that brings us to this next slide, which shows that the intensity of that feeling amongst the younger generation is quite strong. So although it's 65% on average across all respondents in 11 markets, 4,700 people surveyed, when you look at just the isolate for the 18 to 24 age range, instead of 64%, 84% were saying this is important. At the 25 to 34, it was 83, and it declines a little bit with sort of each of those age categories. So I guess when an airline looks at this and they're seeing their future and they're understanding what their future customers' expectations are, this would help them understand or proves the point that this is important as the right thing to do, but also for the business. So, sorry, Anton, I'll hand it back to you.
No, absolutely fine. Thanks, Tony. If I just go to the... So what's next in our initiative? Clearly, for us is to keep the momentum on getting more airlines to join the initiative. And when I say airlines, it's also key, I think, for us to bring in or encourage associated organizations in the total value chain. Showcasing best practices. So in 2023, we will be doing work on collecting, integrating best practices. This will be an ongoing initiative where we will ask airlines to share their stories. What are they doing? What works? What doesn't work? And hopefully this will help those that need the help in associated industries, airlines. We will also be introducing a datathon towards March of next year. That will be done with Amazon Web Services. And looking at the impact of diversity, equity, and inclusion on our business outcomes. But clearly, Tony, we will put out more information about that in next year.
Yeah, we'll have some, be watching for that because we'll have a release and announcement on that probably in the early part of January.
So if I could ask one thing from you, where you could help us, and that's really to try and maintain the focus on the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I know through the articles that you would put out, it will put out would keep that focus. Thank you very much. I don't know if there's any questions.
Thanks a lot, Anton. If there are any questions, raise your hand. Kathy? Yeah, if you can use the mic, we can all hear.
What position?
There's one coming.
Oh, there's one coming. So much easier. Thank you. Gender diversity and equality, of course, are very important to all of us, certainly the females in the room here, right? So last week I looked at the IATA Management Committee. 10 members, 1 woman. IATA Regional Leadership, 6 VPs, not 1 woman. So how much progress is IATA making? You know, I heard the numbers for the government's roles, but the top, still a little work to do?
Oh, absolutely. You're 100% right. I mean, we hold ourselves to the same targets as we set for the industry. And we are completely aware of where we are today and where we need to be in terms of these targets. So absolutely, we've got the same work to do.
Special programs for IATA?
Well, special programs, if I can, not necessarily special programs. There's a couple of areas. The one is what we looked at is firstly removing any barriers to diversity within the organization, the way we recruit, the way we promote, etc. So that's the first thing. Secondly, is to constantly monitor, because in this initiative we give the organization the opportunity to set their matrix. So what do they include in senior roles? And we do exactly the same thing. So in that regard, we are tracking at approximately 19-20% today in senior roles, and these clearly we will hold ourselves to the same target. So, I mean, a practical example, when we recruit and we go out to the market, we will ask as a minimum in the shortlist that we have a balance of diverse candidates as a start. So clearly we need to do things that are practical, things that we can actually do, and not just hold ourselves to you know, ideals rather, but doing practical things. So the question's fair. We hold ourselves to the same standards and to the same targets.
Yeah, and Anton, if I can maybe throw a little bit of, I suppose, thanks your way. One of the things that our People Performance and Development Department did earlier this year was work for an equal salary certification. So we know we're not going to attract people into the organization if females believe that they're going to be paid less than men in the organization. And we took that very seriously. We did all of the data disclosure. When it came back, we were basically clean. Is that correct?
We had some we had some things to correct, which we corrected at the beginning of this year, and the certification is global, so that covers all the regions across the globe. But as Tony said, that's important for us to purely from if you just look at an entry point into the organization. Someone looks at the organization, well, yeah, at least as a minimum, okay, you are treating people from different genders the same.
Yeah, and we were the first company, the first or the second company in
Switzerland? Yeah, it's the second company in Switzerland, or from Switzerland.
To be globally certified. So, you know, if you're looking for a concrete example, that's something that every employee is aware of and appreciates in the climate that we've built within the organization. Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Any other questions? One more.
Hello? Oh, there we go. Hi, Dina Kamel from the National in Abu Dhabi. I'm just wondering how far IATA thinks it is from having its next Director General be a woman, And if that, the reasons that hasn't materialized yet, is this perhaps, you know, what we're already seeing reflected in the airlines is that there is fewer female CEOs? Is it a question of sourcing the right talent? If you can help me to understand.
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. I think one of the things we mustn't lose track of is if we are looking at you know, promoting diversity within our organizations, we need to find the people somewhere. And I think today we're talking about, and I generalize, about what is out there today. What I think everybody should be doing is starting to think about this from kids going to school, so that we actually build a pipeline throughout, you know, all industries, so of where we can go and choose, because we just maintain the same pool that we have today. Everybody will be shopping in the same pool. I think what is key is where do we start? So to go to your next question, I think when we look at the, I don't know if Willie's in the room, but I don't see any reason why we couldn't have a female director general. I don't see any reason why not. But to your point of, you know, how many CEOs are available to be able to choose from, hence my previous point, I think it's key that we build, and we look at the same thing in our organizations. How do we build the pipeline of people coming through the organization to make sure we've got the people to choose from at the end of the day?
Yeah. And Dina, I'd also add to that, for those of you who were at the AGM this year, you know that our current chairman comes from Pegasus Airlines. How many are familiar with who our next chairman is going to be? It's Yvonne Makolo from Rwandair. So we will have our first female chairman of the IATA Board of Governors starting in June of 2023. Yep, the back of the room.
Thanks, it's Ollie Gill from the Daily Telegraph. That has all set out gender diversity. It won't have missed your attention that airlines such as Virgin Atlantic are pushing beyond that into the sort of LGBTQ plus area. What is IATA doing in that area?
It's a very good question, because we know, as an organization, we know Virgin's doing that. As a industry, I think we had to start somewhere, and you are correct. Gender is probably one of the things that's the forefront of people's minds, but it's not lost that, you know, diversity, equity, inclusion covers a full spectrum of diversity. So at the moment, we don't have any specific initiatives. The only thing I could say on that is that we need to make sure that the entry or the treatment within any of the airline organizations, we remove any blockers to people being inclusive. So, for argument's sake, do we have any policies, rules, mindset where people are excluded from the industry? But to come back to your original question is, do we do anything specifically on that at the moment? No, we don't.
Yep. Sorry about that. There you go.
Ayşe Kalın from Aviation Turkey. As Tony mentioned, that Pegasus CEO is a woman, and we can see how it goes on. And actually, I was wondering that how this gender balance in the program, how this affects the industry actually in terms of profits or in terms of everything. Do you have a case study or search about it, or any study about it?
I mean, there's been a number of studies where trying to show that firstly, if you just talk about female, but if you have a diverse workforce, that you will get better results. I can't say that we've done a study on that, for sure not. But there have been a number of studies, articles written about, that it increases productivity in the organization, just in terms of, diversity of thought, ideas, etc. I think is for me one of the clear indication that you should have a better business at the end of the day.
And that's one of the reasons why we're doing this consumer sentiment as well, to try and understand what impact that might have on the business as we move forward. So we're trying to understand that, but we don't have any hard data other than the consumer stuff right now.
I think the last thing I would like to say on that is if you just look at the potential workforce out today, if we're only having, I don't know, 20, 30%, we're missing a whole another 20% of potential in the workforce. If we just look at particularly female candidates or females in the workforce. So I think it's not just a question of are you going to be more productive, is your access to resource. If you're excluding them, you're excluding a significant part of potential resource.
Yeah. And maybe, Anton, I'll just add a little bit of color to your response to the earlier question about the LGBTQ community. We've been awarding, with the help of Qatar Airways, Diversity and Inclusion Awards for the last several years. So we did our first one just before COVID. We had the second one just after COVID. And particularly in the first, but actually in both, the winners of that award had inclusive approaches to diversity and inclusion. So the winners were not, that were highlighted weren't specifically for their gender diversity, but they were for their overall diversity and inclusion programs. So in that sense, although we're not doing something specific, it's included within the initiatives that we're highlighting. Okay. If there are no further questions, then I'd like to move on to the next part of our program.